When 82-year-old Margaret saw a black man standing inside what she thought was her best friend's house, she didn't ask questions. She called 911. But what happened next? Nobody saw coming, because the 911 dispatcher who took that call was the man's wife. And what started as a false alarm turned into a life-changing lesson about judgment, forgiveness, and humanity. "You're going to regret this, young man. I'm calling the police right now." Those were the first words 82-year-old Margaret Benson shouted as she angrily dialed 911, standing on the porch of a beautiful suburban home that she believed belonged to her best friend. What she didn't know? The man inside wasn't a burglar. He was the new homeowner. That man's name was David Carter, a retired firefighter who had just moved in with his wife and kids a week earlier. David was inside the house fixing a bookshelf when he heard someone banging on the door, hard. When he opened it, he was startled to see an elderly white woman standing there, clutching a purse and demanding, "Who are you, and what are you doing in my friend Alice's house?" David calmly replied, "Ma'am, I think you're mistaken. My family and I just bought this house last month. The previous owner moved to Florida." But Margaret wasn't having it. Her face turned red, her voice rose, and she shouted, "Don't you lie to me. Alice would never sell her home to someone like you." David froze. He'd heard that tone before, accusation mixed with prejudice. But before he could respond, Margaret pulled out her phone and said, "I'm calling 911. You'll see what happens when the police come." The front hallway felt unnaturally loud. The steady tick of a clock upstairs, the soft thump of a child's toy somewhere in the living room, all shrank under the weight of Margaret's voice. David kept his hands open, palms visible, a small practiced gesture meant to show he wasn't a threat. Behind him, through a narrow glimpse around the doorframe, he could see his daughter pressing her forehead to the glass, eyes wide. His son peeked from behind the sofa, clutching a stuffed dinosaur. "I'm not trying to be rude," David said, voice low and deliberate. "You must have the wrong address. My name is David Carter. We signed the deed last month. If you want, I'll show you the papers inside." Margaret scoffed, waving a trembling finger. "Papers? Do you expect me to take papers from a man like you? I grew up with Alice. She wouldn't let this happen." She stepped forward, as if proximity could validate her certainty. Neighbors had paused on their lawns. Mrs. Lopez from next door stood with her morning coffee halfway to her lips, watching. A dog barked 2 doors down. The suburban calm was fraying at the seams. David fought the urge to raise his voice. Firefighting had taught him to stay steady in chaos. Parenting had taught him to explain gently when fear ran higher than facts. He breathed slowly and tried one more time. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but entering without permission isn't safe for anyone. If you'd like to come inside calmly, I'll show you the papers and we can sort this out." Margaret's jaw tightened. For a moment it seemed she might step back, but anger is a skillful mask, and she tightened it like armor. She tapped her phone screen, ready to confirm the call. David's heart thudded in that brittle silence, the kind that lives in moments before sirens. He glanced at his kids, gave the smallest shrug, an apology without words, and waited for what would come next. Margaret's hands shook as she jabbed the numbers into her phone. Her face was flushed, her voice trembling with anger and panic. The second the operator picked up, she blurted out, "Hello, this is an emergency. There's a man in my friend's house. He's refusing to let me in. I think he's dangerous." The dispatcher's tone was calm, controlled, the kind of calm that only comes from years of handling fear. "Ma'am, please take a deep breath. Can you tell me your location?" Margaret quickly rattled off the address, glancing nervously toward the closed door as if the man inside might burst out any second. She clutched her purse tighter, her knuckles white. But on the other end of the call, the dispatcher's fingers froze above her keyboard. The address that came through on her screen sent a chill down her spine. She blinked twice, sure she'd misheard. But no, there it was, her own address. It belonged to her and her husband. The dispatcher's name was Vanessa Carter, and the man Margaret was accusing of being a dangerous intruder was Vanessa's husband, David Carter. Vanessa's heartbeat kicked into overdrive. For a split second, her mind went blank, but her professional instincts quickly took over. She steadied her voice, forcing herself into the same calm rhythm she used with every other emergency call. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "please describe the man for me." Margaret's voice came through sharp and judgmental. "He's a big black man, looks like he's trying to take over the place. He won't even open the door properly." Vanessa's grip on her headset tightened. Every word pierced deeper than the last. Her husband, gentle, respectful, patient, was being painted as a threat simply because of how he looked. She could almost picture him now, standing there on their porch trying to reason with a stranger who refused to listen. She forced herself to stay composed. "Okay, ma'am," Vanessa replied evenly. "Please stay where you are. Officers are on the way." The moment she ended the call, Vanessa ripped off her headset and grabbed her phone. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed David's number. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, honey." His voice was calm, but she could hear the strain underneath. "David," Vanessa said quickly, her voice low and tight. "Please tell me there's not an old woman outside accusing you of breaking into our home." David sighed heavily. "Yeah, she's here. Says she's calling the cops. I didn't even raise my voice, Ness. She just assumed the worst." Vanessa closed her eyes for a moment, trying to control her anger. "Okay, don't worry," she said finally. "I'll handle this. Just stay calm until I get there." And as she hung up the phone and grabbed her keys, one thought echoed in her mind. This call just got personal. Within minutes, the quiet neighborhood was flooded with flashing red and blue lights. 2 police cars screeched to a halt in front of the Carter residence, tires crunching over the gravel driveway. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains and front lawns, whispering to one another as the sound of police radios filled the air. Margaret stood on the porch with her hands planted firmly on her hips, a look of vindication spreading across her wrinkled face. She waved frantically at the approaching officers like a woman who had just caught a dangerous criminal in the act. "There. That's him," she shouted, her voice trembling with both fear and triumph. "He's the one." "He's in there pretending to own the place." The officers stepped out cautiously, hands resting near their holsters but not drawing their weapons. They'd seen enough of these calls to know things weren't always what they seemed. One of them, Officer Daniels, squinted as he looked at the man on the porch. His brow furrowed, then relaxed with recognition. "David?" he called out in disbelief. "David Carter? Is that you?" David raised a hand, a mixture of relief and frustration washing over his face. "Yeah, Daniels, it's me." "Everything's fine here," he said, keeping his tone measured. "This lady thinks I broke into my own house. I've tried explaining, but she won't listen." Officer Daniels exchanged a knowing glance with his partner, then turned toward Margaret, who looked utterly confused. "Ma'am," Daniels said kindly, "Mr. Carter isn't trespassing. He lives here. I've worked with him at a few charity events downtown. He's a retired firefighter. The previous owner sold the property last month." Margaret's mouth fell open. "What? No! That can't be!" she cried. "Alice promised me I could visit any time. She wouldn't just sell this house to—" She froze mid-sentence, the next words dying on her tongue as she realized what she was about to say. Her cheeks flushed red, her eyes darting away in shame. Officer Daniels gave her a pointed look, a silent warning that her prejudice had already spoken loudly enough. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said quietly. Before Margaret could respond, another car pulled up to the curb. The door swung open and out stepped Vanessa Carter, still in her dispatcher uniform, her badge glinting under the flashing lights. She walked briskly toward the house, her expression calm but firm, her eyes locked on the scene unfolding before her. The neighbors watched in stunned silence, sensing that something far bigger than a simple misunderstanding was about to unfold. "Ma'am," Vanessa said calmly but firmly, her voice carrying the authority of both a dispatcher and a woman protecting her family. "I'm Vanessa Carter. I took your call earlier." Margaret blinked in confusion, her mouth opening slightly as if the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but too slowly to stop what was coming. "You? But how did you get here so fast?" she stammered, eyes darting between Vanessa and the uniformed officers. Vanessa's expression softened, though her heart was pounding. "Because," she said, taking a step closer, "that intruder you called about is my husband. This is our home." The words hung in the air like thunder after lightning. For a long moment, the world seemed to go still. Even the chatter of curious neighbors quieted, and the rhythmic flicker of the police lights painted everyone's faces in alternating shades of red and blue. Margaret's mouth fell open. "Your husband?" she repeated weakly, pointing a trembling hand toward David. "You mean this man?" Vanessa nodded, her tone steady but not cruel. "Yes, ma'am, this man. The one who opened the door when you were pounding on it. The one you accused of breaking into his own house." Margaret's eyes darted toward David, who stood a few feet away, hands folded in front of him, face calm but heavy with disappointment. Vanessa continued, her voice low but full of strength. He didn't refuse to let you in because he's rude or dangerous. He refused because you were yelling, demanding entry, and trying to walk into someone's home without permission. Margaret's confidence crumbled before everyone's eyes. Her shoulders slumped and her defiant expression melted into one of shame. I didn't know, she whispered, her voice trembling. I just thought, Vanessa gently interrupted her. You thought wrong, ma'am. You assumed something terrible about a man who's done nothing but protect his home and family. You didn't stop to ask, to listen, or to think. The weight of her words hung in the air. The officers shifted uncomfortably and Margaret's eyes welled with tears. For the first time, she looked genuinely remorseful. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean any harm, I was sure I was doing the right thing. David gave a small, forgiving smile. It's okay, ma'am, he said quietly. Just, next time, make sure you know the situation before calling the police. Some people don't get second chances in situations like this. Margaret nodded slowly, the truth of his words sinking deep, and for the first time that day, silence wasn't heavy. It was understanding. A week later, the autumn sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the quiet street. The Carter home looked peaceful again. No flashing lights, no shouting, just the sound of children laughing in the backyard. Inside, David was repairing a loose door hinge when the doorbell rang. He hesitated for a moment, wiping his hands on a towel before opening it. Standing there on the porch was Margaret Benson, the same woman who had once stood there trembling with anger. But this time her face carried a different expression, nervous, uncertain, and deeply apologetic. In her hands, she held a small wicker basket wrapped in a white cloth. Hello, Mr. Carter, she began softly. I wanted to come by and say I'm sorry, properly this time. She lifted the basket slightly. I baked some cookies, my mother's old recipe. David blinked, surprised, then smiled faintly. That's kind of you, ma'am. He opened the door a bit wider as Vanessa joined him from the hallway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Vanessa's face lit up with gentle warmth. Hello, Mrs. Benson, she said. Those smell wonderful. Margaret smiled nervously, her eyes darting between them. I wasn't sure if you'd even open the door after what happened. But I wanted you to know that I've been thinking about it, about how wrong I was. Vanessa accepted the basket and placed it on the entry table. Thank you, she said softly. It means a lot that you came back. From that day on, something unexpected happened. Margaret began visiting the Carters regularly, not to accuse or question, but to learn, to listen, and to rebuild the trust she had so carelessly shattered. Every Sunday afternoon, she'd walk down the street carrying a small tin of cookies or a bouquet from her garden. She and Vanessa would sit on the porch sipping tea, sharing stories about life, family, and the world's changes. David would join them sometimes, telling tales from his years as a firefighter, rescue missions, moments of courage, and the lessons he'd learned about kindness and second chances. One quiet afternoon, as the three shared a laugh over one of David's stories, Margaret's eyes grew distant. I lost my husband years ago, she admitted softly. Since then, I've been alone. I guess I was scared of how fast everything was changing. But you two, you showed me there's still good out there. Vanessa smiled warmly, reaching out to squeeze her hand. The world doesn't change unless people do, she said. And from that moment on, the three became unlikely friends. A retired firefighter, his wise dispatcher wife, and the elderly woman who had once feared them. It was living proof that even the ugliest misunderstandings can blossom into lessons about empathy, forgiveness, and the simple power of human connection. Because sometimes the call that begins with fear can end with understanding, peace, and a friendship no one saw coming. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more powerful and inspiring stories. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.